Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And today I wanted to talk about one of the questions that I encourage students to reflect on when we do Super Coach Academy. And the question that I'll ask them all the time from day one is, what's really on offer when we explore the kinds of things we explore in this podcast, these principles behind the human experience, the inside-out understanding? In other words, if somebody really gets what it is we're speaking about, what is it that they got? And I don't just ask the question of coaches that I'm training. I ask the questions of my clients. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of very different answers. I've gotten more peace of mind. My problems look simpler. It's easier to solve problems, more freedom. I got my sense of humor back, better decision-making, less angst, less worry, clarity of desire, clarity of intention. I've had game-changing insights about my business or about my relationship or about my life. The range of answers is vast. But of all the things that people get, the one that seems to make the biggest difference, the gift that keeps on giving, is a kind of waking up to a deeper dimension of ourselves. Waking up to the space within us. The space where we're not only okay no matter what. We can see that we've always been okay, regardless of what we've been through. And in my work, that space within, sometimes we call it home, but sometimes we call it innate health or our innate mental health because it was already there before we went looking for it. It can't be created. It can't be destroyed. It's innate. It is of our nature. And when we wake up to that, when we realize that, it becomes real for us. We stop spending so much time and energy fixing ourselves. We stop spending so much time and energy trying to make ourselves better, to improve ourselves. And it frees us up. It frees our minds up, and it lets us enjoy what we already have and create more of what we want and need. Now, finding your innate health doesn't mean the world is suddenly going to start dancing to your tune. It doesn't mean that your body's going to instantly heal of all its aches and pains and all its illnesses. It doesn't mean you're never going to be sad again. You're never going to be scared. You're never going to be insecure. You're never going to worry. It just means that even while life keeps throwing you surprises, keeps throwing you curveballs, you're just going to find yourself able to be with what's happening with grit and grace, enough grit to keep moving forward and enough grace to enjoy the ride. And that's why all the names that this field has had over the years, the inside-out understanding, psychology of mind, neocognitive psychology, the three principles, my favorite way of talking about what it is that we're talking about is health realization. And as far as I know, that term was first coined by Dr. Roger Mills. And he came up with it because he saw that when people are able to even quiet their insecure thoughts, their overactive imaginations, when they can quiet it for even a few moments, they drop into a kind of inner wisdom and common sense and innate mental health. And that was my experience. My health realization came in the midst of drinking a beer, watching a DVD. And it was a DVD of a talk by Sid Banks, the Scottish mystic. And at one point during the talk, he said, every human being is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. And beer came out of my nose, and I started laughing for about 10 minutes because somehow I knew that it was true. Somehow, despite years of therapy and depression and suicidal ideation, I got it. We're all sitting in the middle of mental health. We just don't know it. And I wrote about it in the Inside Out Revolution. I said, for Sid to say that mental health was natural went against everything I'd learned and taught in my first forays into the world of self-help. Yet I could instantly see the truth of it. After all, babies don't need therapy. And while I can't honestly say I remember what it felt like to be in the womb, I knew from watching my own kids grow up that other than during periods of physical discomfort, they lived in a pretty continual state of mental well-being for the first few years of their lives. In seeing the original grace of my innate mental health, I felt as though the burden of nearly 40 years of struggle had been lifted off my shoulders. Now, that doesn't mean I've always felt great in the 11 years or so since I had that initial realization. It's not true that just because well-being is our nature, we're always going to feel wonderfully well. We get caught up. I get caught up. I get caught up in my thinking, and we can get so caught up in our thinking that as soon as we are, we're just instantly subject to every emotional color in the spectrum. But just because you can get caught up doesn't mean that well-being isn't innate. To say that, well, if you can get caught up, well-being's temporary, that's like saying that the presence of heavy clouds is indicative of the disappearance of the sun. The sun's there all the time, even in our darkest hour. It's just sometimes, depending on where you live, a lot of the time, there's something between you and the sun. There's something when we get caught up between us and our clear seeing. And that's the truth of nature. Well, the truth of human nature is that our mental health is always there, and it's undiminished by cloudy thinking and feeling, no matter how much of the time that cloudy thinking and feeling is present. And what I found to be really interesting is that for most people, once they begin to realize their own mental health, they just kind of naturally become interested in helping the people around them wake up to theirs. And that turns out to be a lot easier than most people think. Because if you want to help people realize their mental health, the only thing you really need to see is that it's always already there. Underneath the noise of their symptomology, undiminished by their circumstances, they're already sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. And for me, I've come to see any time I'm struggling with somebody, if I'm struggling with somebody in my family, I'm struggling with somebody at work, I'm struggling with a client, it's always because I can't see their health or I've lost sight of their mental health. And I've begun speaking exclusively to the noise in their head, to their conditioning, to their conditioned self. And I heard a talk recently with Dr. Bill Pettit, one of my colleagues, and I loved what he said. He said, don't talk to the mask. Talk to the soul behind the mask. And eventually, that will talk back to you. Have fun, learn heaps, and I'll talk with you soon.